Keep getting better each day. Like Tay said at the beginning, we keep find my way back to it. Get better at one thing each day. Bucs on 3. 1, 2, 3. Bucs.
Bucs fans, here we go. Our early Fear the Bay 53-man roster prediction for your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And we're going to start it off with a shocker. A superstar player is going to be cut here because I've seen enough out of the rookie Jalen Daniels. And that means that he's going to be the new QB1 and Baker Mayfield will be getting cut in our prediction here. And that is, of course, a joke here, okay? So this can be our early 53-man roster prediction. I'm your host, Dana Morales. And it's early because the Buccaneers still, of course, have one more preseason game to go. 2 are wrapped up, and the Bucs and Buccaneers are 2-0 in the preseason. They beat the Jets. They beat the Chiefs. And there's one more to go, and that is week 3 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. No starters will be playing that game, but starters will see action against the Jacksonville Jaguars in joint practices that will be held next week. So let's get into our 53-man roster prediction for the 2026 season. And this starts, we're going to go room by room here. If you have not done so already, before we get started, please make sure you subscribe, like, share, subscribe. Please help Fear the Bay grow and continue to expand. We want to make Fear the Bay a household name in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers media market. Our next goal is 1,000 subscribers. If you can check if you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, just click the button. It's quick. It's free. Really, really simple. You just got to click a button. And then also, if you are subscribed, I cannot thank you guys enough. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, supporting a small channel as we grow and grow and grow into a staple in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers media market. Now, we're going to go room by room here. The first room we're going to get to is going to be that quarterback room. And last year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they kept 2 quarterbacks. Of course, we remember that Kyle Trask was cut last year around this time at the end of preseason. The Buccaneers kept Baker Mayfield and Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater, now retired from the NFL, recently retired, was with the Detroit Lions this offseason. But the Buccaneers here have them keeping 2 quarterbacks. And now that they have, in this prediction, keep only 2 quarterbacks, that means that the Buccaneers can have 3 or 4 running backs and 5 or 6 wide receivers. It can only be one or the other there. Now, Jalen Daniels has shown enough to me that he can be the QB2. Now, if it doesn't matter if it's Jake Browning, if it's Connor Bazelak, if it's Jalen Daniels, if Baker Mayfield goes down, you are in trouble. Your playoff dreams, your Super Bowl dreams, if he goes down and it's a serious injury, if your QB1, your franchise quarterback goes down, you're done. It's over. You can wrap it up. But Jalen Daniels, when you look at what we saw from the Chiefs game between Jake Browning, and of course he got banged up. He was banged up coming into the game, but we saw in the limited reps with essentially the same, offensive weapons and offensive line, you saw Jalen Daniels, the rookie, be more effective in his limited opportunities. Again, that first drive, he helped the Buccaneers. He drove them down the field and ended with a TD pass to the blocking tight end, Keith. But Jalen Daniels, to me, has shown enough that he can be the QB2. Now, I mentioned this before. I like Jake Browning. If you go back to that 2023 season, you see why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to bring him in. 2025 season wasn't too good. Early, what we've seen here in the preseason, just one game, not even a whole game, right? About a quarter and a half, a little bit more. It wasn't too good. It was sloppy. It was ineffective. It was slow at times by Jake Browning. But Jalen Daniels, he comes in. He's like the Energizer Bunny for the offense when he came into the preseason. Again, he drove the first drive in the third quarter, drove the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down the field, helped them score a touchdown. He is QB2. He looks like the second best quarterback on this team. Now, of course, Baker Mayfield goes down. You're kind of screwed. And he's a similar quarterback when we look at Baker Mayfield and Jalen Daniels. They're both guys who can use their legs to escape. They're dual threat quarterbacks in that manner. But also when Jalen Daniels, early in his career, you're seeing him, run and not necessarily look down the field, but at times he is looking down the field. So when he's moving, still keep his eyes down the field. Think about, for example, that TD pass he threw to O'Keefe. He was on the run to the right, and he kept his eyes down the field into the end zone. As a tight spot he was thrown into, but he made the connection, got the touchdown, put 6 on the scoreboard. So again, these two quarterbacks are similar. You don't want a quarterback and a backup quarterback to be too different, because then your game plan, you might have thrown out of the window. Zach Robinson last year had Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix was a completely different quarterback and is a completely different quarterback than Kirk Cousins. And when those two different quarterbacks were in, you saw the offense was completely different. When you had Kirk Cousins in, it was more under center. When you had Michael Penix Jr. in Atlanta, it was a pistol offense, largely a pistol offense. So you want two quarterbacks that are very similar. In this case, the Buccaneers have that in Jalen Daniels and Baker Mayfield. Now, they're different quarterbacks, but they do have the same kind of attributes, again, being a dual threat quarterback and having big live arms. Those guys have big live arms. Jalen Daniels has to work on his accuracy, of course. There was a pass, for example, to Sean Tucker that was a bit behind him. We saw last week also against the Jets. To Bauer Sharp, there was a pass that was a bit too high. He dropped. It was incomplete with the next pass. He redeemed himself. It was Daniels to Bauer Sharp again. But again, I think Jalen Daniels has shown enough that he can be the QB2 behind Baker. Now, in our running back room, there is a current competition between Sean Tucker and Josh Williams. If I was making the decision, it would be Sean Tucker who has the edge over Josh Williams, last year's undrafted free agent out of LSU. This is second year. But again, our starter, we have Bucky Irving, of course. He's back. He's healthy. He looks good. I'm excited to see him and Kenny Gainwell. Two very, very similar backs. We think about stature, their play style. Kenny Gainwell, great receiving back. He used to be a receiver, I believe, at Memphis. He was a slot receiver. So he has a receiving background. He can run routes really, really well for a running back. But both those guys, electric, fast, quick, shifty. When one's in or the other one's in, you don't have to change much. So you can both use them. Zach Robinson can use them as receiving backs, running back. It doesn't really matter how you use them. They're weapons. They're offensive weapons they can use. And then Sean Tucker, we saw last year, when you give this guy the opportunity to play, to give him reps, he's going to make the most out of those opportunities. The Buccaneers last year, his role was more that goal line, short yardage type of back. In terms of like size, he's not overall big. Like the Buccaneers don't have a 6'2", 6'3" running back in this room. Any 240, nothing like that, 230. But in terms of size, he's kind of the bulkiest running back in that room. They use him in the short yardage opportunities. We'll see if they use him that same manner this year. Now, wide receiver room. Last year, the Buccaneers kept 7 wide receivers, but we have to remember Chris Godwin Jr. and Jalen McMillan were both injured at this time. So essentially, it was really 5 wide receivers to start off the season. Now, I have the Bucs keeping 6 wide receivers, and you got Chris Godwin Jr., Emeka, Egbuka, J-Mac, Ted Hurst, and you have Tez Johnson. Those 5, those were locks already. You know they were going to make the team. My 6th wide receiver, it's not Patterson, it's not Sills, it is Cam Johnson. He made the initial 53-man roster last year. He showed out in week number 2 of the preseason. He had a great return. He also showed his ability as a receiver. Remember the San Francisco 49ers game last year where Emeka, Egbuka went down. You had no Chris Godwin, no J-Mac, of course, no Mike Evans. It was the Johnson & Johnson duo of Tez Johnson and Cam Johnson to help propel the Buccaneers to a victory. Those were the main wide receivers out there for Baker Mayfield, and he made do with what he had. And I think Cam Johnson, he's a young guy. He's very speedy. He's shifty, versatile. Again, can be a receiver for you. You can trust him on offense, trust him on end arounds, any of those things you want to do with him, get creative. But also as a returner on special teams, he's big on special teams. He understands the importance of special teams. I think he makes the roster because of his versatility. Special teams is a big part of when you're making these final cuts. Who can provide the most for me in special teams if you're not going to be playing too many reps on offense? All right, at the tight end position, we have a change. So it's been the same 4 guys for the last several years at the tight end position, but now we're going to see a shift here in my prediction. We have Cade Otton, of course. You have Payne Durham. You have O'Keefe, blocking tight end. Caught the TD pass by Jalen Daniels in week number 2 of the preseason against the Kansas City Chiefs at Tampa. But yeah, Bauer Sharp. He was the final pick in the 2026 draft for Jason Light and company. He's a very athletic tight end out of LSU. Started off his career as a quarterback, transitioned to tight end, and you just see his athleticism, you see his size. He's very, very athletic for his position. You can use him in many different ways, screens. You can get really creative, and he's still really raw at the position, given the fact that he was a quarterback before, and he made the transition in college. I think he has a real opportunity when you think about the lack of production that's gone on behind Cade Otton with Payne Durham. Devin Culp, of course, would be, in this case, getting cut. Maybe a practice squad guy if he cannot find somewhere else. If he clears waivers, might come back as a practice squad player. But I think Bauer Sharp has a strong possibility. This is a bold, maybe it's a bold prediction here. But I think Bauer Sharp, by the end of the season, maybe the middle, he will be officially tight end 2 on this team. You have the duo of Cade Otton and also Bauer Sharp being your top 2 tight ends. I think Zach Robinson is going to want to run a lot of offensive formations. We have 2 or 3 tight ends, and I think Bauer Sharp is going to be that second tight end. He brings a lot of juice and athleticism after the catch. He's an athlete first and then a tight end, and he has that quarterback intelligence. Starting offensive line unit. Now, these guys played no snaps together in the entirety of the 2025 season. Remember, the season started off very wonky. Tristan Wirfs did not play for the first 3 or 4 games. It was Graham Barton who was filling in at left tackle. Remember, the team didn't really feel confident with Charlie Heck starting at left tackle, so it was Graham Barton. And, of course, Cody Mauch missed the entirety of last season. The majority, he got hurt very, very early on. Ben Bredesen was in and out. And then Luke Gedeke, who was in and out, but he was more healthy than he was, of course, in the 2024 season. But that is your starting 5 at the offensive line. But when we look at the tackles specifically, I have the Buccaneers keeping 4 tackles. Of course, Tristan Wirfs, best tackle in the game, best tackle in the NFL. They have Luke Gedeke, who's a great bookend tackle on the other side. You have those 2 bookends with Wirfs and Gedeke. But who's behind them? You're going to have Justin Skule, the veteran. He was in Tampa before, spent some time with the Minnesota Vikings last year, came back to Tampa now. This offseason was signed in free agency. And then you have Ben Chikuma, who was the undrafted free agent last year out of Georgia State. Still a raw player, but those are your 2 tackles behind Wirfs and behind Gedeke. At the inside or interior offensive line position, at the Buccaneers keeping 5 guys here. You have, of course, your starters, Bredesen, Barton, Mauch. You hope they can all stay healthy. But behind them, you have Dan Feeney and the 5th round draft pick at guard out of Notre Dame, Billy Schrauth. So Dan Feeney, most likely, the way it's set up here, he's most likely going to be the backup center. So if Graham Barton goes down or you need to move him over, you need to maybe slide him over to left tackle, you need to move him somewhere else besides center on the offensive line, Dan Feeney might be that guy who fills in for him. So he's likely your backup center, your primary guy there. And then Billy Schrauth, if any of those interior offensive linemen goes down at the guard positions, Cody Mauch and Ben Bredesen, he's going to be likely your first guard to step up and take one of their spots in terms of and in the situation of an injury arising. So those are your 5 guys. Now, this would mean Luke Haggard, Elijah Klein out of UTEP. If you remember, the Buccaneers drafted him in the late rounds a few years ago. Those guys will likely be cut. Ben Scott, another offensive lineman. But those will be your guys there. Now, Elijah Klein, I could see him as, even Luke Haggard, as a guy who can come back on the practice squad. But as of right now, on the initial 53-man roster, it's initial because there's going to be changes throughout the entire year. Guys go down. You move guys up from the practice squad. You sign guys from other teams. You make trades. Guys are always going to be shifting on a 53-man roster. But for my initial 53-man roster, I have the Buccaneers keeping 5 interior offensive linemen. Now, let's start looking at the defensive side of the ball. And when we look at the defensive line, they're very, very stacked here at interior defensive line and also edge rush. So our interior defensive linemen have the Buccaneers keeping 6 this year. Last year they kept 5, so this will be an increase, of course, of 1. You have Vita, who he had the trade request, he had the trade demand, he wanted his new contract. The Buccaneers gave him that new contract. It's a 1-year, $30 million extension. Keeps him in until the end of the 2027 season, so he'll be a free agent in March of 2028. $6 million in new money for 2026. He gets bumped up from $18 million for 2026 to $24 million, and he'll be making $24 million next year in 2027. Elijah Cansey, if you remember last year, he had his big goal for the season was to be the top sack guy in the NFL. Lofty goals, but he has the potential if he can stay healthy. Now, can he beat a guy like Myles Garrett? I don't know, but in terms of defensive tackles, I think he can have that season if he actually stays healthy. He could be the top sack production guy, sack generator at the interior defensive line if he can stay healthy. He has the tools, he has the intangibles, he has the skills, the tool set, all those types of things that you look for in a pass rushing defensive tackle. But he's also a guy who can, of course, stop the run. He had the goal of being the top sack guy in the NFL last year. Now his goal for this season is just staying healthy for all 17 games in 2026. So a little bit of a shift there, but I think it's necessary. He needs to stay healthy this year. He's a big pass rusher for this team when he's healthy. He got hurt last year with week number 2 against the Houston Texans. Now, the Buccaneers this offseason brought over A'Shawn Robinson from the Carolina Panthers. Big, mean, aggressive guy. He reminds me a lot of an Ndamukong Suh. Behind your starting 3 in a 3-4 look, you have Elijah Roberts, who in his second year, he's put on more weight. He looks stronger. He looks faster out there. In week number 1 in the preseason, had the sack in the second quarter, had a tackle for loss. You also have DeMonte Capehart out of Clemson. He was the 5th-round draft pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. And you have the veteran Raheem Nunez-Roches. Now, with those guys being your 6 interior defensive linemen that you keep, you're going to have to move on from guys like Jason Jones, Elijah Simmons, of course. I think those guys may be competing with a guy like Raheem Nunez-Roches for that 6th and final spot. The Buccaneers do decide to keep 6 interior defensive linemen. But as right now, I would give the veteran who's been in this defense the edge over those guys. I think those guys could fall in the practice squad. If they're not cleared, I'm pretty sure Jason Light will want them back. Todd Bowles will want them back on the practice squad if they clear waivers. Now, let's get to our edge rushers. And I think this year, they're stacked more than any prior year. Maybe that Super Bowl year, of course, we had JPP and Shaq Barrett. But let's look at the edge rush room. Of course, you got Rueben Bain Jr. and Yaya Diaby. Both those guys did a tremendous job in their limited reps in week number 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. They caused many headaches early on for Justin Fields. They met at the quarterback on one of the plays where Rueben Bain just goes underneath the armpit. He swipes the armpit, pushes the right tackle off, gets to the quarterback. It looked like that Miami run in 2025 with Akeem Messidor on one side and Rueben Bain Jr. on the other. Both of those guys always meeting at the quarterback. And in this game, it was Yaya Diaby getting pressures on his own, but also Rueben Bain Jr. meeting him at the quarterback. Now, none of them recorded sacks, but they did record QB pressures. Behind them, you have David Walker, who is looking tremendous. In my opinion, he is the edge rusher number 3, and he could even be competing for some starting reps, maybe if Yaya Diaby, I think Rueben Bain Jr. is a lot, but if Yaya Diaby maybe is not being as productive in terms of generating sacks as you would envision a guy in his contract year. Maybe at some point David Walker steps up, not fully taking his job, but just taking a few reps from the veteran there. Behind David Walker, you have Al-Quadin Muhammad, who's coming over from the Detroit Lions, had 11 sacks last year, didn't impress too much in week number 2 of the preseason, at least from the initial eye test. Got to look back and see if I missed something. But he likely is that edge rush 4. And then Anthony Nelson rounding out that room as our 5th edge rusher. Last year, the Buccaneers kept 5. I have been keeping 5 here this year as well. Now, in keeping 5, you're going to have to move on from a former 2nd-round draft pick. He's a fan favorite in Tampa. I don't want to take that, but Chris Braswell, of course, I think it's the end of the run here in Tampa, the end of the Chris Braswell era in Tampa. Just didn't materialize. Just like Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, it was a miss by Jason Light. Logan Hall, a miss by Jason Light. Chris Braswell appears to have been a bust by Jason Light also. Now, Jason Light did strike gold, it appears, with Rueben Bain Jr. and Yaya Diaby is doing good enough to consider him to be a solid starter. But Chris Braswell didn't pan out, of course, out of Alabama. The Buccaneers likely move on for him. Now, if the Buccaneers were to keep 6, I think Mo Camara would be that guy over Jack Pyburn. Mo Camara being that 6th edge rusher in that room. But I think he's more likely going to be a practice squad guy who the Buccaneers move up at some point if there's an injury, which injuries, of course, always happen. Now, let's look at the inside linebacker room. The Buccaneers kept 4 inside linebackers last year. Of course, no more Lavonte David. Mr. Buccaneer here, and I know Derek Brooks is known as Mr. Buccaneer, but Lavonte David, no longer with the team. He was your green dot guy. He was the guy who Todd Bowles would talk to. He spits out that information, that play to the rest of the defense, make sure everybody's lined up correctly. Now that new green dot guy, the quarterback of your defense, is the veteran Alex Anzalone, who he really excels. He's an aggressive guy. He excels as a pass coverage linebacker. And with Detroit, he was partners with in the inside linebacker spot with Jack Campbell, who Jack Campbell was a young guy coming out of Iowa, and he turned into an all-pro linebacker. So the Buccaneers, I'm sure, are hoping that Alex Anzalone's mentorship can help Josiah Trotter. I don't think, of course, his dad, Trotter's dad, was a linebacker in the league, played for the Buccaneers, played for the Eagles. He has a brother in the league. I don't think he needs too many more mentors. He has his coaches as well. But it's good to have Alex Anzalone, that guy next to you who knows what to do. He's brought up a young rookie linebacker and helped him be part of the help and influence of him becoming a all-pro inside linebacker. We're talking about Jack Campbell there. Now, in the initial depth chart, Josiah Trotter was not the starter. It was Savasi Dennis and Alex Anzalone as their 2 inside linebackers. But I think that's just trying to make the rookie earn his keep, right? Earn his spot as a starter on this team. I don't think the Buccaneers are really thinking that Savasi Dennis will be the starter. And if you've seen the In the Current behind the scenes documentaries that the Buccaneers post, when they were starting to plan out the 2026 free agency period and the draft, they came into those meetings with the idea that they need to find 2 inside linebackers. And of course, Savasi Dennis being your inside linebacker last year, it was a bit of a roller coaster for him. Had some highs, had quite a few lows. If you remember the Bijan Robinson lows where looks like he was on skates. Kyle Pitts, same thing there. Jahmyr Gibbs against the Detroit Lions, but he's not going to be your starter most likely this year. It'll be Josiah Trotter and Alex Anzalone. Behind him, though, I think having Savasi Dennis as your linebacker 3, if one of those 2 guys go down, a guy who knows the defense, a guy who's very young. Listen, the story is not over for Savasi Dennis. Last year was his first full year as a starter. I think that if he stays healthy and he continues to learn the playbook, if he's not the starter, doesn't allow this to get to his head, he keeps his confidence high, and just always be ready. Always be ready for your opportunity, because injuries, again, always happen. You never know where you're going to need to step up and start for this team, maybe for a short period or an extended period, but you want to be ready for that. I think Savasi Dennis, it's way too early because, again, only 1 full season of being a starter last year. Way too early to consider him a full-on bust as of yet. It's not as bad as Chris Braswell, okay, at the edge rusher room. And then Christian Rueben being my 4th inside linebacker here in this 53-man roster prediction. Now, I think he's not completely safe though, okay? I think he has veteran leadership or veteran experience, of course, starting. He started games for the Panthers last year, played a bit with the Los Angeles Rams to start his career, but he hasn't been healthy. Your best ability is your availability. I think a guy like Cade Fordham, who's the undrafted free agent rookie, he has impressed in training camp a bit. I know Todd Bowles likes him. He impressed in week number 2 of the preseason, was a very physical tackler, on the defensive side of the ball, plus on special teams as well. So he brings that versatility. Your linebacker 4 is likely going to be out there on special teams as well, covering kicks, and he has that versatility as well. So I wouldn't say Roseboom is a lock by any means. I think the Buccaneers want somebody who's a bit more experienced, but I don't think that if it's between Cade Fordham and an injured Roseboom or a still banged up Roseboom, maybe they go with the undrafted free agent rookie, but we'll have to see. Only time will tell. All right, let's go down to the cornerback room. And of course, you have your 2 starting outside corners. So today we saw a glimpse with Zion McCollum on the outside, Jacob Parrish on the outside also. And I have here Benjamin Morrison as a starter, but he is not really a starter. He's been banged up, of course, throughout all of the preseason. He's getting back now. It looks like they're kind of ramping him up to be healthy for week number 1, be able to play in week number 1 against the Cincinnati Bengals. But he has missed with a hamstring injury, just like last offseason, training camp preseason. He's missed the entire offseason activities with an injury, and that's going to hurt, of course, his development. But your 2 outside starting corners are going to be Zion McCollum, and they're also going to be the other guy opposite of him is going to be Jacob Parrish. And the inside nickel, we saw this in week number 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Your starting nickel is most likely going to be Keontae Scott, the speedy, aggressive, just hard-nosed defensive back out of Miami, former partner with, of course, Rueben Bain Jr. Now, he's very, very versatile. He can play safety. He can play outside corner. He can play nickel, of course. So you can kind of move him around. He's your chess piece. He's that ultimate chess piece for Todd Bowles, but he's likely going to see a lot of game time his rookie season here in 2026. Ayden Garnes. He didn't have as impressive as over weeks 2 as he did last week in week number 1 when he got that pick 6 caused by the pressure, that David Walker pressure, of course, on Bailey Zappi. But Ayden Garnes likely is going to earn his spot here on the 53-man roster. And then behind him for that 6th cornerback spot. Last year, Buccaneers kept 6. I have been keeping 6 here also. I have Josh Hayes being that 6th guy. Now, it could be Pepe Demarion Williams, who has spent time with the Baltimore Ravens before, has a little bit of experience in the NFL, but it could be Pepe Williams or Josh Hayes. So again, Josh Hayes is not a lock here to make the 53-man roster, but if we're looking for special teams, because that last cornerback likely has to play a bit of special teams, of course, Josh Hayes has experience playing more special teams than on defense. So if we're looking from purely a special team standpoint, you would likely keep Josh Hayes, but maybe Demarion Williams, they feel confident enough with what they've seen on him that he could play both on defense and on special teams. This kind of reminds me of last year when the Buccaneers kept John Bullock over Nick Jackson. I thought Nick Jackson was, at the time, the better just natural linebacker over John Bullock, but they kept John Bullock because he was the better special teams tackler and coverage guy. He had, I believe at the time, last preseason, the most special teams tackles for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But again, this could be a position where it's Hayes as that final cornerback or Pepe Demarion Williams. If you want a guy who's better on defense for you, it'll be Pepe Demarion Williams. If you want a guy who's better on special teams, it's likely going to be Josh Hayes. Now, safety. We're keeping 5 safeties here. You have, of course, your former All-Pro, Super Bowl winning safety, Antoine Winfield Jr. You have Tyke Smith. Those 2 guys as your 2 starting safeties. You're doing extremely well there. Now, the depth behind them, that is a bit questionable. J.J. Roberts went down last preseason. It was week number 2 in the joint practices. He went down with a knee injury. I believe it was a torn ACL. He's been out recovering ever since. Now, they're ramping him up too. I believe he came back and did some individual practice drills. But he might be a guy who's ready for week number 1 or early on the season. We have to see exactly when he's ready to come back. But the Buccaneers were really high on J.J. Roberts. I remember at the scouting combine, Jason Light talked about getting J.J. Roberts back and getting David Walker back. Those are like getting 2 draft picks back or 2 additional draft picks for this 2026 season. They're really high on him. I've told you guys before, J.J. Roberts, Todd Bowles essentially said, he's as fast as a corner, but he can hit you like a safety. They like his IQ as well. Miles Killebrew is not going to provide too much as a a safety in terms of defense, but he is a special teams ace. He spent a long time with Danny Smith in Pittsburgh, comes over from Pittsburgh to be with Danny Smith again in Tampa here. He's going to be a big special teams guy. Not too much of a natural safety, but more of a special teams ace for you. And the last guy, I have Rashad Wisdom. Rashad Wisdom also versatile. He can play special teams. You can trust him a bit on defense. You don't want any of these guys to be in for Antoine Winfield Jr. or Tyke Smith because there's going to be a drop-off. But I feel like Rashad Wisdom, he had an interception last week against the Jets, had a few good tackles against the Chiefs in week number 2. He's a smaller safety, but he, in terms of like bulkiness, he reminds you a little bit of Jordan Whitehead. Doesn't look exactly like him, of course, but a bit of that smaller but bulky safety. I think he's going to be that final 5th safety. There's not a lot of depth in this room. Again, you have Winfield, you have Smith. Those are 2 starters. But behind them, if one of those 2 guys go down, you don't have a Christian Izzy anymore to fill in, and you don't have a major drop-off because Christian Izzy, arguably a starter. He can play outside cornerback, he can play nickel, he can play safety. Very versatile piece, but he went off to the Detroit Lions to hopefully get more playing time for himself. Didn't really see an opportunity where you get many playing reps here in Tampa. He didn't get many reps last year, of course, because those 2 guys, Winfield and Tyke Smith, were healthy. And he had Jacob Parrish at the nickel position, but not much depth in that room. Now, you do have the veteran Melifonwu, who the Buccaneers signed a few weeks ago, but I think Rashad Wisdom, he knows the defense. He can play special teams for you. If you need him in a pinch to play defense for you, you can do that as well at 5'9", 210. Again, smaller safety, but he is built. He is a compact build, maybe a guy who, of course, again, you can trust in limited reps. All right, and then your specialist, that's not going to change this year. It's going to be Chase McLaughlin. It's going to be Riley Dixon. It's going to be Evan Deckers. Now, that is my early 53-man roster prediction. We have to see how the final preseason game plays out. But I think for the most part, this roster is set. You're just looking at a few final spots. Maybe the final opportunity between Jalen Daniels and Jake Browning to prove who's going to be the quarterback 2. Think about that final cornerback position. Is going to be Pepe DeMarion-Williams, or is it going to be a guy like Josh Hayes? And the safety room also, is Melifonwu, the veteran, going to get that final spot? Or he's wearing that 35, that former Jamel Dean number, or is going to be Rashad Wisdom, or a guy like J.J. Roberts. So there's still some spots that are up for grabs. The defensive line, interior defensive line, also Raheem Nunez-Roches. Is he a lock, or is a guy like Jason Jones or Elijah Simmons going to get the final 6 interior defensive lineman spot if they keep 6 on the roster? Let me know in the comments below how you guys feel about this 53-man roster prediction, who you would have added or taken out. I want to read all these comments, see what you guys are thinking here. But this is it won't essentially be final, but it's kind of final because we have, again, one more game. So we have to see how the final week shakes out. But this is pretty much how I envision the final 53-man roster, initial 53-man roster looking in just a couple of weeks. Again, if you have not done so already, please make sure you guys subscribe. It is free. It is easy. You got to click a button and you can help out Fear the Bay here. If you're a big Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, or if you know somebody who's a big Buccaneers fan, send this channel to them, send this video to them, let them know about Fear the Bay. And again, the easiest way for you to support the channel is by subscribing. We're on the race to 1K subscribers, so all you have to do is click that button if you haven't done so already, and help us get to 1K. I'm your host, Daniel Morales. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm your host, signing out. Bye-bye.